time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
How you doing on Bad Attitude Tuesday? Well, you know what? You're doing the best you can. And isn't that what we all do? The best we can. Oh, Tuesday, June 16th. Okay. Donald Trump refuses to release this memorandum of understanding that is supposedly what is going to be signed this Friday between the United States and Iran. It's really interesting. I read a media newsletter today because, Rupert Murdoch owns the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, and, of course, Fox TV. The Wall Street Journal tends to take a more anti-Trump stance, not because Trump has any sort of feelings, not because Murdoch has any sort of feelings, but Murdoch wants to cater to his audience. And the business Wall Street Journal audience has a very dim view of Trump, so the Wall Street Journal has a dim view of Trump. And New Yorkers hate Trump. The New York Post goes after Trump. But for the most part, the people who watch Fox TV, they like Trump. So, which is how Rupert Murdoch doesn't have any real moral compass. Fox generally is Donald Trump's biggest supporter because that's what his viewers want. He wants to make them happy, so they stay viewers, and he makes lots of money. But a media newsletter I read this morning said, interestingly, during the day, Fox hosts are going after the administration for not releasing the text of the memorandum of understanding with Iran. Saying things like, Donald Trump is supposed to be the most transparent president in history. So why don't we see this? When is he going to release it? We need to see this. We should be seeing this. But on the primetime Fox shows, the ones that get the most audience, those people are still 100% whatever Trump says, whatever Trump does is A-OK. But I think it's interesting because it isn't often that there is this sort of schism within Fox Cable. And it leads me to wonder if the daytime hosts, who are not quite as well watched, are like a trial balloon, testing to see this idea of we should know what's in this document, to see what kind of reaction it gets. Maybe. And then again, maybe I'm just trying to find a silver lining where there is none. One thing we do know is that we have been told by various government officials, or at least Iranian government officials, that an important part of this deal is not just what the United States and Iran agree to, but an important part of this deal is no more attacks on Lebanon. Iran has said that as far as they are concerned, Lebanon and its safety and its security as a country is very important to Iran, and they have said it is a part of this deal that must happen. Now that's going to be really interesting because Benjamin Netanyahu has made it quite clear. His entire upper levels of his government have made it quite clear that this deal has nothing to do with them and has nothing to do with what they do or do not continue to do in Lebanon, which, call me crazy, sounds like a deal breaker, doesn't it? One faction, Iran, is saying we're not going to sign a final deal unless there's protection for Lebanon. Donald Trump apparently didn't even bother to consult Netanyahu before moving ahead with this. When this all became public, we were told Netanyahu was as surprised as anybody. And then Israel made a point. They gave Donald Trump some crumbs. Okay, we'll do a ceasefire for a couple of weeks. But they made it clear that they were not a part of this deal. They were not signing off on this deal, and they were not going to agree to anything that the United States and Iran negotiated about Israel. Also talked to Randy Manor yesterday, and all the big things, the whole uranium things, refining uranium, bombs, et cetera, and so forth, the really big things are going to be supposedly negotiated. Remember, we signed this deal on Friday, and then for the next 60 days, people sit down and work out the details of all this other stuff. Randy Manor, who knows more about these kind of high-level diplomatic negotiations than I do, said there's no way that in 60 days this is going to be worked out. Remember, before Obama got his signed deal with Iran, people much more experienced than Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and J.D. Vance sat with Iranian representatives for 2 years. 2 years to negotiate the Obama deal, which, of course, Donald Trump tore up. And Donald Trump thinks that those same issues are going to be settled in 60 days with a regime that is far more right-wing than the one that he had before. So, yes, the New York Times is reporting that Donald Trump wants to put the war in his rearview mirror. Well, of course he does. It's been a disaster for him. It has been a disaster for him. And he wants to walk away so desperately. And also, did you see where it sounds like some, if not all, of the sanctions that we imposed on Iran about selling their oil and gas? Well, we've announced that those are going to be lifted immediately. They're not going to wait for Friday. They're not going to wait for a 60-day negotiation. They're being released immediately. And though Donald Trump says that the Strait of Hormuz is open, it's not, at least not as of today. It's not. And Donald Trump has said passage through the Strait of Hormuz is going to be like it was before, free and open. And Iran has made it quite clear in their language that going forward, they are going to, quote unquote, manage the strait. They're going to manage the strait. What do you think that means? What do you think that means? Sounds to me like the kind of language that leads to one country charging a toll. You want to go through the Strait of Hormuz and not get attacked by our drones? You want to find out where we put those mines? Well, pay up, buddy. So, you know, for the last few weeks, as I've been reporting on all the different things that all the different people are saying about this situation we have in Iran, and I've described it as choose your adventure. Well, it looks like the adventure is coming to an end, but it looks like we pretty much lost everything. What did we gain? We're lifting sanctions against Iran. They have not promised free passage through the Strait of Hormuz. They have not put into writing any kind of restrictions on their nuclear material. As far as I know, they have not agreed to any kind of international inspections. Okay, all right. We did accomplish regime change. That was one of Donald Trump's stated goals, and we did it. We put a more conservative, more anti-American, more unfriendly group in charge. Yay, us. It's been a disaster from start to finish. And Donald Trump wants to walk away, and he wants to start telling everybody what a huge success it was. Unless he can figure out a way to blame this on Obama or Biden, because did you know how Donald Trump paid God only knows how many millions of dollars when all is said and done, painting the bottom of the reflecting pool in Washington blue because he wanted it to look, more like a swimming pool? Well, guess what? It's full of algae and duck poop. His beautiful blue pool, if you've seen it, it's kind of greeny brown. And here's the explanation. It's Obama's fault. Yep. I'm not sure how, but it's Obama's fault. Yeah, okay. There you have it. So, there has been, as you know, the nomination by Donald Trump of Todd Blanche to be the actual head of the Department of Justice, not simply the acting head. The job, since he was made the number 2, I've always sensed he was gunning for the job. Now he is acting. He's done everything Donald Trump wants. He has been auditioning for the big job, which Donald Trump has now named him to, though it's going to be one interesting confirmation process. And what has Todd Blanche done to try to impress Donald Trump? He is investigating and trying to find dirt and ways to charge Trump's enemies. Trump's enemies. Not anybody who is really suspected of committing a crime. The people Donald Trump doesn't like. Yesterday, Gavin Newsom was talking quite openly about how he has discovered that the DOJ is going after him and his wife. He talked about it last night. We have some of the audio of that. Listen to Gavin Newsom.
In recent days, federal agents have knocked on the doors of family, friends, and former employees. Not because they found a crime, because they're simply trying to find one. They're demanding records. They're abusing the grand jury process, digging through years and years of random documents. Donald Trump isn't just coming after me because of my mean tweets. He's coming after me because I'm considering running for president, because he hates that I've consistently called him out over and over again for his lies and deceit. Donald Trump is simply the most corrupt president in American history. To Donald Trump, who I know is watching because he watches everything, I have a message for you. You can subpoena my records. You can investigate me. You can harass me. Put my name on every and any enemies list you have, but leave my wife and family out of your personal vendetta.
And in case you have the least bit of doubt that what Gavin Newsom is saying is true, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse talked about Todd Blanche targeting Trump's opponents. There's a new book coming out called Regime Change, written by New York Times reporters Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman. And Sheldon Whitehouse was on with Chris Hayes. He talked about what's going on. In part, he makes reference to this new book, but he talks about what he sees coming from Todd Blanche. the targeting of Donald Trump's opponents. Listen to this.
It seems like there's a whiteboard somewhere and markers of who Trump wants to target, and they're just kind of going down the list and ginning up what they need to. Is that how it looks to you?
Well, I think there are two things going on. One is I think Trump feels his presidency skidding away from him. His numbers are crashing. Even Republicans in Congress are starting to stand up against him. He can just feel that his presidency is failing, and so that adds to his sense of desperation. And then he's got his stooge, Todd Blanche, basically auditioning to be the next attorney general. He's going to have to go through one hell of a confirmation. He's going to want Trump to be able to overlook a lot of stuff. So building cred with Trump by going after his enemies is kind of the strategy. But, you know, you're right. You looked at Jim Comey, you looked at Letitia James, you looked at my 6 colleagues who are veterans who talked about soldiers' rights to disobey unlawful orders. Fed Chair Powell, they went after him. Bill Pulte's Little Shop of Horrors produced Lisa Cook and Adam Schiff. Over and over and over again, you see these cases, and when they go forward, they fall to smithereens. Next up is probably the Southern Poverty Law Center. I don't predict a good outcome for that. And the upshot of all of this is the Department of Justice has lost something really important to it and to all of us, and that is the presumption of regularity. The government enjoyed a presumption of regularity until President Trump and his phony baloney attorneys general.
What Senator Whitehouse is talking about with that presumption of regularity, that is the same thing we saw here when the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuted the Broadview 6. When the judge, April Perry, was first given the grand jury testimony, parts of it were redacted. They were covered up. She couldn't read them. The prosecutors said, oh, those redactions are not pertinent to the case. It's personal information. It's stuff like that. And the judge was like, okay, because the judges trust that prosecutors are telling the truth and following the law. That is what that regularity is. Judges trust that prosecutors will not break the law and that they will not lie to judges. When defense attorneys complained and besieged April Perry over and over and over again, claiming that she needed to see an unredacted version because she would find impropriety, they were sure of it. Finally, she was kind of like, okay, basically, I think she wanted to shut the defense attorneys up. She was like, okay, give me an unredacted version. By what I read in the reporting of this, within 2 hours of receiving that unredacted version, smoke was coming out of her ears because whatever improprieties had been taken with the grand jury were apparently blatantly obvious. The lead prosecutor, Sherry Mecklenburg, saying things she shouldn't have said to the grand jury, leading them in a certain direction when she didn't really have anything to back it up. She did all kinds of things that crossed a line. When April Perry had Andrew Boutros, the actual U.S. attorney for this district, look at the grand jury transcripts, he himself said, yes, this is absolutely not proper. We are dropping these charges right now. This has happened in so many different courts, in so many different ways, that the result has been that many, many, many judges, not just at the federal level, but at the state level, district judges, appellate judges, are learning the hard way that they cannot trust what prosecutors are saying to them. That this assumption that a prosecutor knows the law and is following the law, which was just given blindly before, because it was unthinkable that prosecutors would be inappropriate with a grand jury. That's not how it was done. But it's how it's done now. And that is going to really change our court system going forward. Maybe for the better. Maybe that assumption that they're doing everything right should never have been there in the first place. I don't know. But it's gone now, or it's going. It is dying. Because in this effort to please their bosses and to please the ultimate boss, Donald Trump, everybody is throwing out the playbook. They are throwing out the law books. And they are just trying to do anything they can to give the government and Donald Trump the outcome that they seek. Do you think Donald Trump cares if a prosecutor plays fast and loose with the law? He probably admires that. I mean, you know he does, don't you? He admires that. So don't expect it to change anytime soon, and it sure as heck. I mean, like I said before, Todd Blanche makes Pam Bondi look like a legal scholar. He is an empty vessel for Donald Trump. But I guess that's what it takes. That's what it takes to get ahead these days. We in the state of Illinois, looking local here for a minute, we signed a new budget. Yahoo! That has been wrapped up. But the question still exists. What's going to happen with the Bears? Our very own Paul Shivari, who's back at the studio, says he doesn't think that they're really going to go to Hammond. But, Paul, I have to tell you, I was talking to George Bliss, and George Bliss has known the Hallis family for decades. And he said that the state of Indiana has been whispering in their ear for more than a decade. You know, you can use all the fields at Notre Dame for all your practices. We've got that Gary Airport. You know, we're going to give you a blank check to build a stadium. I don't know. We'll have to see what's going to happen.
Are the Bears
I agree
intending on moving from Hallis Hall and Lake Forest, though?
I don't know. George Bliss said that Indiana has been working on the Hallis family for more than 10 years. And so you could do this, and you've got this, and you've got this airport, and we'll give you money, and look at all of this. And I believe the Bears are going to...
Has Indiana done their due diligence, though, the environmental impact reports and that sort of stuff?
No.
I mean, how prepared is Indiana?
Well, you know, I don't know. The reporting is that they've told the Bears that they will literally write them a blank check for $1 billion. And I know that in Arlington Heights, once it is built out with this big entertainment center with hotels and restaurants and everything, the Bears stand to make billions. But that's like doing that kind of money is more than a decade away. Will they take what's available right here, right now? Or are they willing to bide their time for another decade to get the big paycheck at the end? I don't know, Paul.
Yeah, I don't know either. But I think the two key things to listen for is, will Indiana just give the land to the Bears, or will it be like a rent-to-own deal for the land that they'll build the stadium on? And then what happens to that property that they currently own in Arlington Heights? Because, I mean, they still have to pay taxes on it, even if it's undeveloped. So if they still own that, I would think that there's still a shot for Arlington Heights to eventually be the site of the stadium.
Yeah. I mean, you know, don't you think it's like most things, follow the money? You know, follow the money trail, and what deal ends up being the best? Mm-hmm. Anyway, Paul Shivari and I are going to take a break. 773. I always forget to do the phone number. 773-763-9278. 773. Say it with me. 763-9278. You can text me on that number. You can call and speak to the lovely Paul Shivari, and he will put you through to me. And we are going to spend the next half hour reading your texts, taking your calls, and talking more about the news of this day. We'll be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are taking your calls and reading your texts and continuing to talk about the news of the day as we do for the first hour of the show Monday through Thursday. And of course, on Friday, we spend the entire first half of the show talking about the news of the week. One thing that I wanted to share with you in the first half hour and didn't get to, I told you that we just have a new state budget here in Illinois. After the big brouhaha of the signing and all the pictures and all the videos and all the statements, Speaker of the House Chris Welch and Governor J.B. Pritzker talked about the Bears. And this is from what they said right after the budget signing. Listen to this.
I think Illinois is still the place the Bears want to be. I think it's important that they tell us what they want. I think it's important that we continue to have those conversations with them. And if we can get to an agreement, then we can ask the legislature to consider it.
And I guess I'd just add, Marianne, just a bonus round, that my principles that I came into this discussion with remain, which is we're not going to do what Indiana has done, which is raise taxes, sales taxes, raise tolls on people in order to pay for a stadium for a billionaire-owned team. And instead, we're going to protect the taxpayers. That's principle number one, protect the taxpayers of the state of Illinois. We want the Bears to stay. I love the Chicago Bears. I want them to stay either in the city or in the state of Illinois, but I want them to be here, and we're going to do everything we can that's within reason to do that, but we're not going to put that burden on working families across our state.
I think that is the right posture to strike. We love the Bears. We would like to keep the Bears, but what are we going to do? Defund some of our programs to build the Bears another stadium? Okay, sorry. Yeah, the free lunch program for schools in distressed areas. Yeah, that's gonna go away because we need to take that money to build a new stadium. You think that's a good idea? I don't think so. David from Bloomingdale, Illinois, texted in about the reflecting pool. Because I said, Donald Trump painted it blue because he wanted the base of it because he wanted it to look like a swimming pool. But now with all the algae and the duck poop, it looks kind of green, kind of greeny brown, and now it's Obama's fault. David in Bloomingdale texted in, the reason for the algae and the reflection in the reflection pool is because that darker color, the dark blue underneath, doesn't reflect enough ultraviolet from the sun in order to kill off the bacteria. So the darker color painted on the bottom of the reflecting pool is actually causing, or at least aiding, the bacterial bloom. I don't know, scientists. That makes sense to you? I don't. It makes sense to me. I'm sure Donald Trump took that all into consideration, David. I mean, he's a kind of guy. He dots the I's and crosses the T's, don't you think? Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Greg from Lake in the Hills is on the line. Hello, Greg.
Hey, Joan. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I was going to second what the previous texter said about the reason for the blooms. Anytime you have like a darker color like that, it's going to attract, or it's going to absorb the sun rays better than reflecting them. I know, like, I used to have a pool, an above-ground pool in my first house. It came with that. I didn't want it, but I had to learn really quickly. Otherwise, I did have the algae problem. Even though the liner of the pool was almost a white with blue in it, a very, very light color. And that's one of the reasons. But it's very difficult to maintain, especially when the warmth comes in and you get it can turn a pool that's perfectly clear. It has high clarity in the water. It can bloom overnight. Once you have one day like that. But, you would think these guys that are supposed to be his specialists, they painted many pools and, Anyway, it's the other reason the main reason I called is yesterday you had on John Lothian, who
Yes.
I wasn't familiar with. I probably heard him before in your station, but on your program. But he was you asked him about the change that was made that allowed the SpaceX to be carried pretty quickly, by the NASDAQ 100, which is a very prominent fund. It's the top 100 companies. But that it used to be that this happened up to a year. It took for this to happen.
A company had to prove itself.
Well, yeah, exactly. But here's the impact of what this is what I think you were trying to understand, and I was too. But I had heard this when it first happened. They were talking about it on MS Now. The impact will be on passive index fund investors who are 401k and IRA account holders.
In other words, those of us who have 401ks or other retirement accounts, we could now be owners, whether we want to or not, of SpaceX because of what you're describing.
Right, and we'll be the ones that'll be funding the growth. Whoever has these that has the equity type funds, which are forced, like you said, forced exactly what that is. They have to pay the inflated value. And I read something else. I don't have the things right in front of me now. I did send you it yesterday. Anyway, it was too late. But anyway, that's the only thing I really wanted to say is that this is who it's going to screw. Anybody who's not looking at their portfolio, their IRA or 401k, or doesn't have the possibility of getting out of any of these funds that might have SpaceX in it, I'd recommend. I mean, I'm not an investment advisor, and I don't even play one on the radio here. But I would highly recommend that as soon as possible you look into your portfolio, and if you do have SpaceX in there, or in the next 2 weeks you show it in there, I would do my best to get out of that fund itself, because what's going to happen? They're going to be forcing you to take it, and you're going to be paying it. And as soon as the Trumpian rules come into play, where sucker people in and then you pull the rug out from underneath them, that's what's going to happen. So SpaceX is going to make out like a bandit, and everybody else will be holding the bag. And but I have one final thing. It's a little bit maybe a comical look on the Bears. I saw a picture they had in online today in Google that came up, and it was about the continent, the one landmass called Pangea. Have you ever heard of it? Where
when the land of the world was all one bit of land, there were no continents, there had been no drift apart. It was Pangea was one big area of land in a planet that was otherwise water.
Well, I looked at that map real closely. I expanded it on my screen, and I looked, and sure enough, there in North America, where you could see North America, they had all the dinosaurs and everything. There was a little inscription, "Future Home of Bears Stadium."
I like that, Greg.
Yeah, a little far sight. Even
yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you for the smile, and thank you for the call. Let's take one more call. Let's go to Ron, who's on the line from Chicago. Hello, Ron.
Hello, yes. I heard that part of the memorandum is that we will be giving Iran $300 billion for damages from our bombs.
Yes, I haven't read that in every article, but I can't remember. One article I read did mention that, because Iran kept saying, we want reparations. We want reparations. You've done a lot of damage to our country. We need reparations. And everyone was like, no, not going to happen. Well, apparently there are some reports that a fund has been created for Iran to rebuild itself. Yes, apparently we did that.
Oh, that's correct. And if people remember, 2 years ago, Trump said that he was going to stop the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. And 2 years later, now he's making the Ukraine priority and saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that. because he doesn't, as far as he is concerned, the Iran war is behind us. It's, we did that thing, we finished that thing, done. And he has said that now he is going to take another look at what's going on in Ukraine. Woo-wee.
Yeah,
that should be fun. At the end of the day today, I'm going to be talking with Joel Ostro, and I wanted to ask him about something that I heard. I don't know if it was a report on CNN or where, that, one of the big problems that Ukraine is having is that they don't have Patriots. They don't have a way to really be effective against missiles that come through the air for them. And those are the missiles that have been attacking civilian places and attacking Kyiv. And we have been really weird about giving them Patriots. But what I heard is that Zelensky is now just saying to the United States, we don't need your Patriots. We don't need you to actually give stock that you have in a warehouse somewhere. We're going to try to make our own. We could use a little bit of information on how you make them, because we have already started to put together the infrastructure for us to make our own Patriot-like missile interceptors. So that'll be interesting to see whether or not we give Zelensky any blueprints or advice. I mean, it literally seems like the least we could do. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the call. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Every day, Monday through Thursday, for the first hour of the show, we read your texts, we take your calls, we talk about the news of the day, the news of the week. We have been talking about Indiana more and more these days as the Bears are trying to make us believe that they are on their way to Hammond. But we've always talked about Indiana every time Bobby calls, and he is on the line today. Hey, Bobby, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, yeah, Indiana. We got some really pretty nice countryside around here. The only real problem is it's overstocked right now with rooster-sucking Republicans. Otherwise, it'd be pretty lovely. But I wanted to let you know, I called today just on a lark, and they're supposedly going to send me my paperwork for my absentee ballot. So we may still have vote by mail yet in Indiana. Now, this is LaPorte County I'm talking about. I don't know how, other counties time-wise do it. But apparently, if you're at least in LaPorte County, check with your county, whatever it is, you should be able to put in for your paperwork to start your ballot for the fall.
That's wonderful. And, it doesn't make any sense. Republicans are always going after mail-in balloting and saying that it's more susceptible to fraud, which makes no sense because mail-in ballots are loved by Republicans. Republicans send in more mail-in ballots, I believe, than Democrats do across the country. So I don't understand what that's all about. It kind of seems to be cutting off your nose to spite your face. But,
well,
hey.
The only thing, if I don't see it in a couple weeks, I want to warn you, Joni, I'm going to be pounding on your door, and you better have some cold chicken and potato salad in the fridge for me and Willow to gnaw down on. But last year that I had to, because I said, this seems like it's taking too long, and I called them up, and sure enough, they said, well, we don't even have your information. Well, I gave them, So things do happen, so I'm going to keep on them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's all you can do. And, here in Illinois, we're very, very lucky. I had an opportunity a while back. I, for my first ever time ordering a mail-in ballot, and I saw this form, and it was like, oh, would you like to vote by mail, like forever, like going forward? If you do, just check this box. So I checked it, And the next time there was an election, I was waiting and waiting, and I thought, oh my God, I must have done something wrong. And then all of a sudden my ballot showed up. And it is, we're a democracy. I think everybody should vote. I really do believe everybody should vote. And if that means that Republicans get elected, if it's the will of the people, so be it.
Well, I hope someday that this state flips or something happens and we do have mail-in as just a matter of routine. Anyway, you have a good day.
Thanks, Bobby. You too. And, if you're looking for someplace to come over the 4th of July, my house is as good as any because I'm not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, I think because the 4th is on a Saturday, the 3rd, which is Friday, is the holiday for a lot of people. And I'm going to be here. I am going to be here toiling away. I wonder what guest I can get to join me on a holiday. I'm going to start thinking about that. Let us go back to the phone lines. Our good friend Dave from Hoffman Estates is on the line. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. Yeah, on that mail voting, the Republicans whining about it. They got nobody to blame but their boy DeJoy. Remember how he messed around and played with the mail?
Yep.
So
yep.
And that. But I was looking this morning, and I seen a article or whatever, and this guy, maybe he's like Hartman's buddy from Cripple Creek there, that George. And this guy writes, Iranian state media Mer News has now published what it claims is the draft agreement with Trump. Here are terms they claim is in the deal. First one is a permanent and immediate cessation of war on all fronts, including Lebanon. The U.S. and its allies would be required to present reconstruction plans for Iran worth at least $300 billion. A U.S. commitment not to interfere in Iran's internal affairs and to respect the sovereignty of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Full lifting of the naval blockade within 30 days. And something you're saying, a U.S. commitment to withdraw its forces from areas surrounding Iran. If this peace deal was good in his favor, he'd been waving it around like a third.
It would be plastered on the front page of every newspaper, every newsletter. You're right. He would probably, if it was really a good deal for us, he would go on national television. He would say, all the networks, I'm going to be talking at 8 o'clock tonight. It's going to be a big announcement about Iran, and everybody would have it. And he would say, we're getting this, we're getting this, we're getting this. It's a great deal. It's much better than Obama's deal, blah, blah, blah. Instead, it's all secrets. It's all secrets. And even when it is revealed, it'll be like, well, a lot of that we're going to be negotiating after we sign this memorandum. We're going to be negotiating that after the fact.
And he would be, like you say, and he'd be strutting around like Cock Robin and bragging how he got it done, and it didn't take him almost 2 years to do it, and stuff like that. And if it were good, he would go take Vance's place. Because didn't he used to do that on that show, The Apprentice? The other people would do all the work, and then he'd just come sauntering in and tell them if they're fired or whatever, that he had nothing to do basically with it and that. And this morning I watched Morning Joe, and at Roundtable they had this author historian Walter Isaacson said, "Iran won the war, we won the battles." This is the same thing that happened to us in Vietnam. Same thing, the guys that always say we won every battle, but
the big country with overwhelming military might couldn't defeat the Viet Cong.
And he did a story where he said that Eisenhower had looked at going into Vietnam after the French, and he asked General Matthew Ridgway, if we went to Vietnam, what would it take? Ridgway replied it would take 8 years and at least 8 divisions, to which Eisenhower didn't go. And a division roughly is 10 to 20,000 men. So he wasn't too far off from what we sent. What was it, 250,000 at the high water mark and that? With the Ukraine, in the 24 hours, I think I told you back when that was first starting, and he said that, I said, is Trump going to be using that that 24-hour clock that they used to have in that show with Kiefer Sutherland, 24, where it stretched out for how many years? So, just a thought. Let me get off if there's somebody else looking now.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Our good friend Jim is on the line from Chicago. Hello today, Jim.
Hi, Joan. Elon Musk couldn't help himself. He had to sprinkle a little sunshine into that ordeal up in Belfast when they had that to dust up with the immigrant, some group of malcontents burned some buildings down. He said, well, the gal you elected in Derry, she's a race traitor. Now, this is the nerve of this guy, a race traitor. Now,
she's a traitor to her race. I get it. I get it.
She's a traitor to her race. I mean, the nerve of this nut. Not only that, but he wants to go to, he wants to go to Mars and whatever little.
Well, that's what he's going to. Now that he's a trillionaire, he's not going to use that money to do anything good in the world or help raise people out of poverty. No, he's going to use that money to go to Mars.
Yeah, I know, but you think of it, it's perfect. You can't get an immigrant up there because they'd have to go through his AI department to get a visa to go there. So he's going to be secure there. And the other one is Pete Hegseth at Normandy, of all places, is lecturing the Europeans about immigration, another nut on immigration. I mean, these people are insane, Joan. Do they really think that in their lifespan, their brief lifespan, that they're going to determine who's going to immigrate, who isn't going to immigrate? And especially the Irish. The Irish had 20,000 protesters in Belfast and Derry for the immigrants because some of those immigrants have been there for 20 years, Joan, and they work in their health care service. So they don't want them going anywhere, and nobody's immigrated more than the Irish have, Joan. They've been all over the planet. So, you know what I mean? So, they're not, give me a break with that. You've got a couple of great guests coming up.
Well, this afternoon we've got William Campbell from Ireland who is going to be joining me. And I'm sure.
Professor later on. Yeah, it's a great show today, Joan. Great show today. Anyway, thank you, Joan. Take care.
Thank you, Jim. It is always a pleasure to take your calls. We are going to be taking a break for news, and here's we've talked about how we're going to be talking with William Campbell from Ireland. We are also going to be talking at the end of the day with Joel Ostro. One of the experts I saw on CNN said if the Ukrainians could get either Patriot missile batteries or develop them and build them on their own, that would turn the tide, and they would actually be able to win this conflict, not simply hold Putin at bay. We're going to talk about all that and more. A little bit of good news here before we wrap it up for this segment. Tom Holland and Zendaya are married. Zendaya has married Spider-Man. And obviously a very private ceremony that wasn't even announced. So good for them. We're going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Returns right now on WCPT 820.
I am so happy to welcome back to our airwaves Majid Padelin. You know him as Brooklyn Dad Defiant, the author of 2 political humor books, The Littlest President and The Bigliest Loser. You can also find him on Substack. He writes Defiant Dispatches. And there is a weekly story time with BDD on YouTube. Man, Majid, you're everywhere these days.
I don't know how I do it.
I don't know how you do it either.
Thanks for having me back, Joan. It's great to be here.
You had some exciting news in New York recently. Your team found a reason to make New Yorkers happy again.
Oh, man. They ended a 53-year drought. And I mean, I don't know what was more exciting was just them winning and the way they won, or the way my city responded to it. Just like it was a complete and total. Everyone, everywhere throughout the city was screaming their heads off, and it was an amazing feeling. I mean, we suffered through good times and bad. Like, in the '90s, we had some good teams. We had Patrick Ewing there, and John Starks, and Spreewell. And actually, in '99, we were in the finals against the Spurs, and they beat us. They beat us as badly as we beat them this time.
Wow.
4 games to 1. Yeah.
Speaking as a Bulls fan who attended not only the three-peat, but also the many building years before the three-peat, I hope that you guys turn this into something that just goes on and on and on, because it is just as exciting as the first one is. The second one, the second one is just as good, and so is the third. And I wish you all of that.
Your Michael Jordan-led Chicago Bulls destroyed my 1990s Knicks, just so you know.
Well, they destroyed everyone. It wasn't personal.
Yeah. But I don't know. It would be great to see. I think we have the right pieces in place. There seems to be a good nucleus on the team. Like, the chemistry is great. We've got those Villanova boys. So we'll see. I mean, I don't want to be greedy, but I do want to be greedy. Do I want to see 1, 2, or 3 more championships? Why the heck not?
Why not? Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is, I hope if it does happen to your team, I always thought that the Bulls management made a mistake. They let Michael Jordan retire. They didn't find a way to keep him. And then they were like, okay, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, we're going to just rebuild. We're going to find a bunch of new talent. We're going to rebuild. That was a mistake, because I remember the Boston Celtics, even after they peaked, they kept their stars, the people who weren't playing at the same level, but the town had come to love them. I had season tickets, and I would have kept those season tickets till Dennis Rodman and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen were playing with wheelchairs. I would have stuck with them for another decade. And I don't think the Bulls management understood the kind of love and devotion that a town can have for not just the team in general. Yeah, it's great the Knicks won, but it's the specific players on the team that I think people fall in love with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's sad, but it's a truth of sports. Sports has become a business.
Yeah.
Now, and it's like, you're talking
but that's where I think it was even a bad business decision, because, I kept my season tickets for like another year. And then I realized that like an entire season, I'd gone to one game, and the Bulls were so unpopular at that point. I had great seats. Wow. I couldn't even sell them on the resale market. Nobody wanted them. So I think it was a bad business decision, but shockingly, no one asked me. I could have told them exactly what to do and how to do it, but nobody asked me. So I hope, that the Knicks will ask your opinion before they make these terrible, bad decisions about the future. So that was and maybe the Bulls will wise up and give you a ring and ask for your input. Too late. I have turned my back on them. They had their chance and they blew it. Too late. Okay, that's the good news. Now, let's talk politics. Let's talk politics. And there is so much going on. What do you think? Do we or don't we have a deal with Iran?
I think tentatively there is something there, but
something there. Okay, something there. It's a start.
It's hard to believe. It is impossible to believe anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. And while I know the leader of Pakistan has confirmed it, but Iran has not yet spoken up. And so that's suspect, and the details of this deal remain elusive and hidden from public view. Yeah. So, without being able to see what's in there, to see how much it resembles the JCPOA, President Obama's deal, it's really hard to opine accurately on whether or not we do have a deal that will stick. Because there are certain points that, Iran doesn't want to give up. Like Iran has suddenly realized, thanks to Donald Trump, that, hey, we can just control this Strait of Hormuz. We don't even need a nuke. We got the Strait of Hormuz. We brought the world to a standstill. We faced the great Satan. That's how they refer to us, as the great Satan. We faced them down and we defeated them. They're coming out of this as though they won, because Donald Trump at one point was screeching, what was it? Unconditional surrender. Total unconditional surrender.
And complete.
So he set the bar sky high. Like, dude, you don't know anything about managing expectations. He set it way high so that anything less than that looks like a capitulation. It looks like you back down, buddy. It looks like you've earned your taco nickname, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
And the interesting, I was talking to one of my callers at the beginning of the show, and we agreed. If this, quote, memo of understanding really was an amazing document that won us a lot of the things that Donald Trump said we were going after, I think he would be releasing it to every news agency in the world. Hey, look at this. Look what instead they're hiding it. They're hiding it so desperately. They're hiding it so badly that even during the day, Fox News is complaining about not being able to read the memo. And that has to be...
Joan, if he loved this deal, he would not only be bragging about it, he would have had it printed out with autographed copies, and he'd be selling them. And it would be on a loop, a nonstop loop on Fox News and News Nation and Newsmax and all those crazy right-wing channels to crow about it. He doesn't miss an opportunity to brag about something. Now he's got supposedly an opportunity to brag and he doesn't want to. That is highly suspect.
Highly suspect. And one thing that Iran has been saying consistently is that Lebanon needs to be a part of this deal. And they've implied that if a ceasefire in Lebanon isn't part of this deal, that there will be no deal. And everyone is very carefully not talking about that. Because Donald Trump knows Netanyahu, I'm sure, has told him already, you didn't consult us. We weren't involved in this. And you can't tell us what to do if we think we need to do something. So there, I mean, if Iran says that's a deal breaker, well, then this deal is already over.
It's such a problem that Netanyahu is involved in this. And I guess he's the reason why we are involved in this war in the first place. But, excuse me, his goal is to stay out of prison. And as long as his country remains in a state of war, that is his saving grace. So, I don't know what needs to happen, but they need to get Netanyahu out of this equation so that calmer heads can prevail, so that we can come up with a peace solution and move forward. But I mean, I don't even know if the people behind Netanyahu, those who would assume power in his absence, I don't even know if they're trustworthy or if they're even worse than he is. You know what I mean?
Well, now that you mention it, that's another accomplishment of Donald Trump's with this Iran war. He has driven a wedge between the United States and Israel that wasn't there before. There, you're right. Another thing to chalk up to Trump. Yeah. We're so proud of him. We are so proud to be Americans. Majid, why don't we take a break? I'm talking to Majid Padelin, Brooklyn Dad Defiant. You can find him on YouTube, Storytime with BDD, and the Defiant Dispatches Substack. We will be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Majid Padelin, Brooklyn Dad Defiant. You can find him on social media, on Substack, and on YouTube Storytime with BDD. You know, Donald Trump has said some weird things. Well, no, I'm sorry. Let me go back. He's said some weird things his whole life, but some unusual political statements. I don't care about inflation. No, actually, inflation is good. He didn't care about the fact that people were struggling. Inflation is good. I don't care about the midterms. That's what he didn't care about. And I find that these things are very odd for someone who is considered to be the leader of the Republican Party to say, as Republicans head into midterm elections coming in 5 months, where even Ted Cruz thinks that they're going to be wiped out. What is that? Does he not care about the party? Does he not understand what he's saying? Because that's possible too.
Joan, I think it's a combination of him actually not caring and his filter, his usual, I guess, filter has been whittled away by dementia. But the quote he said was, "I love the inflation." That was, to me, that was jaw-dropping. And I've obviously been paying attention to everything he's said and done for the past 10 years. But I love the inflation was so astounding, was just, it's mind-boggling in its tone deafness and its carelessness, its political suicide. And then prior to that, about a week or two before that, he said something to the effect of, "I'm not paying attention to Americans' financial situations," and I was equally aghast at that. So, yeah, boil it down to, he just doesn't care. He doesn't care.
Right.
He's not running for election again, like what you said. The other one, he said, "I don't care about the midterms." Either he has a plan to completely subvert the elections, because that's one thing he's been doing. He's been instilling or doing his best to instill distrust in the election system and to make people doubt it. A lot of us feel as though, when I say us, I mean Democrats, feel as though he's up to something, because nobody who cares about elections, about, keep getting their team reelected, talks and acts the way he does. So it almost seems like, it doesn't matter what what I say or do, because I've got, it's something in the bag, right? But Democrats, I just heard yesterday, this was astounding news I heard, and because I was worried myself. I'm like, oh man, he is up to something nefarious. But Democrats have already been running simulations. They're already preparing for every possible contingency. They've got contingency plans for every dirty trick he could possibly pull. And so I am encouraged.
Well, it makes me feel good to hear you say that, because, that's one of the things that my callers always say, that, we know it's coming. We know he's like a cornered animal, and that he will do everything that he can think of to try to pull a victory away from a losing midterm election. And I'm so glad to hear that it isn't just me and my callers who are worried about this, but other people who are, gaming all the scenarios. Okay, he deploys ICE. What do we do? He militarizes, the people he pardoned from January 6th and sends them to polling places. What do we do? He tries to close down polling places. What do we do? I'm so glad to hear that, because we all know it's coming. We all know it's coming.
You literally just identified some of the many. There were like at least 10 or 12 different contingencies that I heard listed, and the 3 that you listed that were part of it. So, rejoice. I mean, I would say don't take your foot off the gas. I would say continue to remind your viewers, your listeners, to please go and vote. Remind their neighbors and their relatives to make sure they vote, they cast their vote. And make sure that they double check their registration, because that's another one of the dirty things that they try to throw people off the voter rolls. So ask them to please double check to make sure that they're registered. Make sure, I'll tell you this, I just got something in the mail yesterday that said that I got a new voter ID card, and it said that I'm in a new district now. And I guess so that happened. So, pay attention to your mail. It's not all junk, okay?
And
I know probably
there are some
95% is junk, but 5% check it, please.
There are states like Georgia where you can be challenged. Oh, I don't think that person really lives at that address. And you have an opportunity to reinstate yourself, but not if you don't even know you've been challenged. I mean, I can't overstate how important it is, even if you are in a safe state, even if you are in a blue state, you have to make sure you are still registered, because a lot of times they make re-registration a lengthy enough process that if you find out at the last minute, you're not voting.
Yeah. Good point. Excellent point there. I feel like a lot of the things that he has been that he's been saying and doing, they reflect an attitude that, I don't care because, I got this thing in the bag. But he's got a surprise coming for him, because Democrats are ready for his tricky nonsense,
And I want a long-term plan from these same Democrats. I want, just like with the Heritage Foundation, where they took experts from different walks of government and had them write a chapter for an agency. And you're going to do education. You're going to do the State Department. How, in the next Trump administration, we are going to change all these things. And I'm sure, in addition to the blueprint for how they were going to be changed, I'm sure every one of those people who wrote those chapters put together a list. And, oh, by the way, these are the political appointees you should put in charge, because they'll do whatever you want. They had a Project 2025. We need a Project 2029, and I hope to God somebody's writing it.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you there, 100%. And I want to say something, that this regime is unbelievable in that there are certain historical touch points that Donald Trump has kind of reminded us of, like with this UFC White House event. That kind of conjures the whole bread and circus thing from the Roman days, and his tone deaf fixation on his ballroom and the arch and all the gilded, the gold in his thing. It's giving let them eat cake, from the French Revolution period. So things didn't turn out well for officials in either of those times, that they were just chock full of corruption. And that's all we see from Donald Trump right now it's just corruption. He's just acting with complete abandon, like nobody is going to check me. This is how he's conducting his presidency, like the law doesn't matter, the truth doesn't matter, the votes don't matter. But I think he's going to find out that all that stuff actually still does matter.
On social media, I follow Michael Wolff, who's written a number of books about Trump and was given basically unfettered access to the Trump administration in its first term that resulted in the book Fire and Fury. He posted on social media something in the last day or two where he said, Trump isn't a negotiator. He's not a policy expert. He doesn't really care about what is law and what isn't. He's a showman. He's a promoter. He's an entertainer. And so what he was saying was this UFC event that took place at the White House, This is what Trump excels at, and it ties in with your whole bread and circuses thing. That he doesn't really, he's not a politician. He doesn't know policy. He doesn't know how to govern. But man, he can put on a show. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just contain him to doing just shows?
Yeah, or developing. He was also a real estate developer too, and you can see that he's, every month, every year that goes by, it looks like he's losing a grip of who he is or what he's supposed to be doing now, because he seems very distracted by building stuff. Like, dude, you're the president. Right? There are people who do that real estate developing stuff. You are not it. If you want to do that, go ahead and resign. Nobody will fault you for it. Resign and resume you can build all the arches and the buildings and the statues that you want to build. But you're the president right now. Do your job. People are struggling to put food on the table and to put gas in their tanks and to pay for child care and health care. And I just saw a report today, came out of the Washington Post, that his ballroom was always supposed to include U.S. taxpayer funds. Always. So it's up to $600 million, I think, and $300 million of that is supposed to be taxpayer funds. And this is from people who had access to the plans from Jump Street from the very first time it was uttered. They saw that taxpayer funds were always the plan. So,
the one, as I've said on the show before, the one silver lining in all of this, with the billions we've spent in Iran and what the money we're spending to paint the reflecting pool blue, and the money we're spending to build this ballroom, and the money that's projected to go for the arch, don't they dare say ever again that there isn't any money for Medicaid, that there isn't any money for food assistance. It's not that there's not any money. It's just that that's not how they want to spend it.
There you go. Yeah, 100%. Say that loud for the people in the back. Yeah.
We don't have money for this. Oh, excuse me. Where did those billions that the president wasted in Iran? Why don't we go back to wherever that money is, since we're not spending it anymore? Let's put that money toward helping poor people get medical care.
Absolutely. Ooh, you're right on the money there, Joan.
And, in addition to being a showman rather than a politician, he is also one of the most petty human beings on the face of the earth. The courts ordered him to take his name off the Kennedy Center. It was removed under cover of a 2-story tarp that has remained. And a lot of people think that the Kennedy Center is going to have to go to court to get them to take down the tarp that is covering the fact that his name isn't there anymore.
Yeah, that's as about as petty as it gets. He lost that battle. He can't admit it. It's really pathetic, and it shows how small he is. It shows how small and insecure. It's really it's such a sign of weakness, And I know we got off the Knicks, right? But I just want to say, like, when we're talking about petty, I understand that the guys that the Knicks defeated were young, but we had some young guys on our team too. And when you're young, you're in. When you're 5, 6, 7, and you're learning how to play the game, your coaches teach you about good sportsmanship, right? When you lose a battle, you be good sport about it, and you shake hands.
Yeah.
And those guys left the court without shaking a single hand, and that's just not cool. You always have to remember you're making millions and millions of dollars, but young kids are watching you.
Yeah.
They are watching how you conduct yourself. I don't care. If you don't want to be the role model, then retire. Because that's part of it. That's part of it. Young kids are looking up to you. So, and the same goes for the president of the United States. I mean, back in the day, he used to be the person that all of us looked up to, regardless of your party, there was always respect for the office.
Exactly.
Always respect for the office.
Well, we
And
used to
it's not there
choose
anymore.
our leaders, I think, with a different yardstick. I think character used to matter as much as intelligence and experience. We wanted, when I was little, you didn't have a shot at political office unless you had served in the military, because that was considered a way to prove your dedication to the country. We seem to have abandoned all that, and whichever clown yells the loudest just seems to be the one that has the best shot of getting into elected office.
Yeah.
Majid,
And
go ahead.
I was gonna say that what's terrible is that he has taken away from us that that ability to celebrate together. Like, he could have had such a big win using the 250th American anniversary to bring us all together. Instead, he used it to separate us, and it's sad.
Yep.
Very sad.
Majid, it is always a delight to talk with you. We're going to have to get you on more often, because you are somebody that I really enjoy, who really keeps up with things and has a great perspective on what's going on in American political life. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Joan. Those words are music to my ears. I would gladly join you anytime you have an opening for me.
Be careful what you wish for. Brooklyn Dad Defiant. You can find Defiant's dispatches on Substack. He's on YouTube. He's on social media. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
There is a lot going on in this country, but there is a lot going on in the United Kingdom and Ireland, in Europe. And William Campbell, who is Irish and does a podcast about all things Ireland, cultural, political, it's called Here's How, and he is here to talk to us about a number of things that I have made note of over the last few weeks that are going on his side of the pond. William, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Joan. I'm doing very well. There's just too much excitement in the world these days, isn't there?
Yes, there is. There was so much that I already had that I wanted to talk to you about. But let's start with what is going on with these immigration riots. Please give us the background and tell us what's happening.
Well, this is in Belfast, in the north of Ireland.
Yes.
As probably most of your listeners who are, I think, fairly well educated politically know, most of Ireland is in an independent country. For the past 100 years, Northern Ireland, 6 counties out of the 32 are still under British control, because a large proportion of the population is loyalist, that's to say loyal to Britain, also called unionist, and mostly Protestants, and the other half essentially of the population, mostly Catholic, nationalists and Republicans, in the sense of not supporting a monarchy. So Republican in Ireland means something distinctly different
than it means here, I guess.
Yes. This is a poor place. There was 30 years of an armed conflict, essentially a guerrilla campaign by the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, who were fighting as they saw it British occupation. There were also terrorist groups on the unionist, loyalist side. They are particularly closely enmeshed in organized crime. Since the end of that conflict, they haven't really disappeared, but they have essentially focused on crime, and as happens in very often very poor areas, they tend to have a lot of social control, and they are particularly identified with the far right. Their politics is very often very incoherent, because Irish people, Irish nationalists, are often viewed as being very sympathetic with Palestine. They will, for example, fly Israeli flags, I think, just out of defiance and oppositionism, rather than any particularly sophisticated analysis of the situation in the Middle East. there are photographs shared on social media whereby these people who are generally far right will fly the Israeli flag on the same flag post as flags that they're flying with swastikas and other far right associations. So, I don't take that terribly seriously. There was an appalling incident where a young man was stabbed and very severely injured a few days back in Belfast. The rioting, unfortunately, in some areas, particularly in Belfast, seems to be the name it has taken is recreational rioting, and this mixed with that type of toxic background has essentially led to race riots, whereby you have people who are associated with these paramilitary stroke organized crime gangs essentially organizing riots. Dozens of families have been burnt out of their homes. It is very, very, very disturbing. There have been far larger counter demonstrations against racism in the centre of Belfast over the weekend. But it is, to say the very least, amusing probably is the wrong word, but it is notable that foreign, by foreign I mean outside Ireland, social media accounts which sometimes pretend to be Irish, posting this as saying that the Irish are taking back their country and the Irish are want to protect their nation from immigrants. The people doing the rioting don't even identify as Irish, despite the fact that they live in Ireland, and are vehemently opposed to Irish nationalism. And it is, we will perhaps discuss him again, but I see that Elon Musk actually took legal action and forced a German TV station, one of the major German TV stations, to re-edit a broadcast where they said that he was promoting the violence, which probably was untrue in the specifics, but there has certainly been a very strong signal boost given to very strongly anti-immigrant rhetoric. That has very little purchase with most people in Ireland. Ireland, aside from these pro-British unionist groups, Ireland is probably the only country in Europe that doesn't have a strong far-right political party, even
William,
in existence.
one thing I want to ask you about this, back in the days when there were the, quote, the Troubles, I remember people from both Northern Ireland and Ireland getting upset that like American news crews were coming over and they were just going to like the 2 or 3 blocks that were decimated, and they were filming there and making the implication was, oh my God, this is happening everywhere. And rightly so. People were like, hey, you need to put things in perspective. So what you're describing is very scary and very violent, but how much of both Northern Ireland and Ireland is really affected? I mean, right now, is it a safe country to visit on vacation?
So this is exclusively in the north of the border, and pretty much exclusively in Belfast and some other towns around Belfast. Within that, it's in fairly defined areas of Belfast. If you kind of look at any of the statistics, if you were to place Ireland on the ranking of, for violent crime beside any US city, it would barely register. It's by American standards, it's extremely low crime rate. So that makes it all the more shocking for Irish people. I think that you're right that, one burning car can, be a large photograph on the front page of a newspaper and make a very compelling few seconds of newsreel, and it doesn't show a million other cars not being burnt. And that's certainly true. It is in a fairly isolated area, but it is substantial in the sense that if you're somebody who comes as to get a job frequently from, a lot of the healthcare staff, nurses and whatever come from the Philippines. That's mostly in the south, but it's also true north of the border. People come to study in universities, and people come from, to do various other jobs. It doesn't take an awful lot of people to be burnt out of their houses.
Yeah, really.
For that to have a huge impact on them. To put it in context, Belfast, city of about 500,000 people. Reading it here, it seems like something in the region of 20 families have been burnt out of their houses. These would be in very tight-knit, very, very closed communities. In the sort of places that, for sure, Catholic nationalists could not live safely. But very often immigrants are not as aware of these very sharply defined ethnic areas of the city, and they will, take a cheap house wherever. For various demographic reasons, housing is much cheaper in Protestant unionist areas, so that would obviously be very tempting for people who are working, especially if they're working on fairly low wage jobs. And but the numbers speak for themselves. The anti-racist demonstrations in the centre of Belfast this weekend were orders of magnitude larger than the number of people involved in the rioting. And it should be said that often the rhetoric around this is protect our women, and that immigrants are coming here and
to rape and murder our women. That's a chestnut.
Exactly. This did flare up previously, and somebody did an analysis of the people who were arrested for rioting. More than 50% of the people arrested for rioting, more than half of them, had previously been arrested for crimes of violence against women, such as domestic violence.
Oh, that's great.
More than half of the people rioting supposedly to protect our women from foreigners coming over here raping and marauding were themselves. And that, I think, says a lot about the psychological profile of people. That's hypercompensation, if I ever saw it.
Yeah, really. Absolutely. There were other things that I wanted to ask you about that are much, much less important than this. I saw on CNN they were reporting that Keir Starmer, the UK's beleaguered leader, is now attempting to make himself apparently even more unpopular by trying to ban all social media for anybody 16 and under or under 16. I'm a little unclear where the 16 falls. How are people reacting to that?
That's in effect that has come into effect in law, at least. I mean, I think that's a mixed bag. It's a very difficult thing to do, and I come from a technology background, and I see a huge amount of technological problems with that. But also, in terms of the psychological effect of some. The use of social media on young people, that is very, very significant. And I think a lot of people are quite, want something to be done about that. Those social media platforms exist largely outside the UK. Actually, in most cases, they have their European headquarters in Ireland. And it's difficult to arrange their existence in such a way that they don't have algorithms that are designed to affect the behavior of young people and essentially get them hooked on that. And the solution, I guess, is to just ban under 16s from that entirely. As I understand, I'm not a psychologist, but as the psychology behind that, it seems to me, as I have read, it seems to me very, very sound, that these apps have a very measurable negative effect on young people. One of the effects that was exposed in this, and this was on Facebook, was they had a logarithm running which would detect when people, particularly young girls, took a selfie and then deleted it without posting. So in other words, the selfie went to the servers of Facebook, but the person then changed their mind and decided not to publish it. And they were using that information to target young women for advertising for makeup and other appearance changing. So clearly, like, the thinking behind it was that if a young girl took a selfie, was unsatisfied with her appearance, she would be at the most vulnerable point to buy whatever product. So that has a lot of purchase. To me, the other side of that argument is, number one, you, in order to enforce that, you must then know which of your users are over 18 and which of them aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, the effect of that is that you must identify 100% of your users, whether they are under 16, I should have said, under 16 or not. And that essentially means that you're creating a database with all of the ID details, verified identification of people. And quite apart from giving something like that to the government, that as a target for hackers is just too tempting. And we've seen too many data leaks, and that amount of extremely sensitive data sitting online as a single target seems to me to be a bad idea. Personally, I think no parent should allow a child to have a smartphone, full stop. But if your kid, who's 11, 12, 13, is in a class where every other kid, or nearly every other kid, has a smartphone, that's very difficult to do. Yeah. And also, if that's the case, you are essentially excluding them from a large part of the culture of their peers. So you have a situation where the parents who allow that are essentially forcing the other parents to either do the same thing or to have their kids, very much excluded from an awful lot of the cultural life. This has been for about 6 months enforced in Australia. They're taking a hard line on it, and to be fair, they're basing it on the same psychological research, which, I have read, and I have to say is absolutely compelling. It's very hard to read that research and say, okay, yeah, but there's, let's not do anything about that because we have some sort of libertarian streak. It is very, very determined and very, very sophisticated psychological manipulation of people.
Yeah. William, I want to talk more about this with you because there's a couple of studies that I've read on this that I want to bring up, but we need to take a break. I'm speaking with William Campbell from Ireland. The podcast is Here's How, all things political, cultural, social in Ireland. We'll be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
With me is William Campbell. He's based in Ireland and does the Here's How podcast that covers all things political, cultural, and social in Ireland. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. We have been talking about social media and young people and tweens and young teens, and the fact that Keir Starmer has announced that there is going to be a ban on social media for children 16 and younger. William, you were talking about some of the research that you've read. Recently, I've read a couple of pieces of research that focused on the United States, and one concluded that there are, since the widespread use of social media among kids of elementary, junior high, high school age, we have had a serious drop in grades and in knowledge assessment, that and you can correlate the two to the grades dropping is at the same time that social media exploded. And there was another study that was released just a couple days ago that claims that if in older folks, social media is responsible for lowering the birth rate. Apparently, people would rather scroll than
I was reading this.
do anything else.
Yeah, I guess, the libertarian in me kind of says that people that even that though that is true, and that I've read that research and it seems to be fairly sound from my inexpert point of view. But exposing children to that is a whole other thing. And I've literally just pulled up as I was speaking there, and what I remembered from I think that a study in Sweden, which has what's called a dose response effect. And that's a fancy way of saying the more you use it, the worse it is. And this was used, for example, to show the link between smoking and cancer. And the dose response effect that's basically means that the more you smoked, the more likely you were to get cancer. So it wasn't just an association between smoking and cancer, it was a sliding scale. And the study in Sweden that I have pulled up here essentially compared different schools in Sweden that had different levels of control on the use of phones in school, from just not allowing kids to use the phone while they are sitting in the classroom to, at one end of the scale, to not allowing them to have phones on the premises of the school at all, and then different levels of strictness within that. And they were able to show that the psychological harm essentially was gradated in this in a corresponding way to the strictness of the ban within the school of smartphones. Clearly, that doesn't affect once they have left school, once they go home. But that having come in the UK, I'm looking at the Irish news today, and the Irish government is saying that they intend to follow.
I think that having been a parent and saw my kid go to high school day in and day out with a backpack filled with what had to be 20 or 30 pounds of books, the one innovation that her high school did was to, instead of having a thick, 5-pound tome for a class, that same textbook would be, the knowledge in the pages would be on an iPad. And I know that a lot of people are worried because, cell phone, iPad, you can load a lot of apps on an iPad. But having seen at least my daughter and all of her friends who went to high school with these backpacks that literally gave them back pain. And unfortunately, because of the classes, they were required to bring their books home every night to do their work. And then the books had to come back and be in class. And when she was able to have some of those textbooks on an iPad, literally the load was lifted. Now, I don't know how you utilize that aspect of technology. Maybe somebody has to police this and say, let me see your iPad, make sure you don't have any social media apps on it. But that is one thing that when people say absolutely no screens, that is one thing that does worry me about, there are some things, maybe just a few things, but there are a few things that these screens are good for. And I hate to see that get lost, but I think the bigger issue is the danger. And if that has to be sacrificed, that convenience, I guess it has to be sacrificed. I don't know.
Oh, I absolutely don't think it has to be sacrificed. I would differentiate between, say, like grade school kids and I guess what you would call middle school and high school kids. So, for kids learning to write, learning to make their letters, learning those sort of basics, I don't really think that the technology has much of a role there. When you're talking about what you're describing there, especially in high school, where, you've got a lot of books, I'm not a fetishist for the old technology. Whatever works. But it is trivially easy. It's trivially easy to set up a device that has all those things and can, allow kids to access all of their school books on one thin tablet, be it an iPad or whatever, rather than 20 very heavy textbooks. It's trivially easy to set that up without having other, for example, Instagrams and social media apps of that sort. And I think one of the dangers is that the Silicon Valley people are highly motivated to say, hey, that's just the way technology is. That's nothing to do with us. And I'm calling BS on that. They build the technology the way they want it to work.
Yes.
And if you want it to do something else, it can be built in a different way. If you want the technology to have school books and not to be open to God knows who sending sexualized messages to 13-year-old girls, that's trivially easy to do. The question is the will. And if you want to know whether or not those Silicon Valley types understand what's happening, you just have to look at where the top of the range private schools, where they send their kids without exception. Every single one of them does not allow smartphones and that type of technology. So they don't allow it for their own kids, and they know what's going on.
I'm speaking with William Campbell. He's based in Ireland and does a podcast there called Here's How. William and I are going to take a break for news, but we will be right back after that.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm speaking with William Campbell. He is in Ireland and does a podcast called Here's How, of all things going on in Ireland, political, social, cultural. William, we got a text. I was catching up on the text line while we were listening to the news, and I'm assuming that this text refers to when we were talking about the violence in Belfast. Kent texted in, can your guest say more about the paramilitary criminal gangs? I don't recall you saying paramilitary criminal gangs. Is that part of what's going on?
Yeah, without a doubt. So there, as I'm sure your listeners know, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, was fighting essentially a guerrilla war, as the British would have seen it, a terrorist war against them. That ended with a peace deal that was signed in 1997, so almost 30 years ago. On the other side of that sectarian divide were several loyalist paramilitary groups. They were responsible for really some terrible loyalist sectarian murders, and the where really terrible things happened. Those people are in very working class, often very poor communities, which are their whole reason for existence, as they would see it, their whole self-description is based on loyalism to Britain and to the crown. Loyal, I should say, to a Britain that's not very loyal to them, but that's not, that doesn't really enter the equation. They have entered crime, very often protection rackets and drug dealing, in a much deeper way since those ceasefires, although that was there all along. And there is no question that many of the leading figures in some of these organizations are involved in this rioting. It seems difficult to avoid the conclusion that rioting is being organized using the structure of these paramilitary/criminal organizations. There have been people setting up what they call checkpoints in the street, essentially allowing people through in their car or on foot, depending on the color of their skin. So, yeah, your caller is 100% correct. There is an involvement there. I don't know, and I think journalists who report on this in much more detail than me they're not able to confirm that this is something that is organized by those paramilitary groups from the top, but it's certainly being run via the structures of those groups on the ground. But no, your caller is correct on that, and they are, to me, they are very, very sinister groups.
Excuse me. I also wanted to revisit Keir Starmer. Are you surprised that he still has a job right now?
I don't know. What time is it? It's Tuesday. There is, I don't know if you've read by 1984 and Animal Farm, the George Orwell books. There is another book by George Orwell called The Road to Wigan Pier, and it's just basically about poverty in England. And in the constituency is called Makerfield, but it's in Wigan, in this place in the north of England, very, very poor, very, very white, very working class area. And on Thursday, there will be a by-election there. And traditionally, this is a seat that Labour has always held since whenever. If you go back a few years, they held it with 60, 70, 80% of the vote. That there are two possibilities in this by-election. You guys will get the result of that on your Friday morning, so be looking out for that. Okay. One possibility is that the Labour Party will lose that by-election, in which case Keir Starmer will be out of a job very soon. And the other possibility is that the Labour Party will win that by-election, in which case Keir Starmer will be out of a job very soon, but for a different reason. Because, as I said, typically Labour Party got maybe 60, 70% of the vote in that constituency. But in the local elections in May last month, which I talked to you after, the Nigel Farage's Reform Party swept the board there. And it's typical of the areas of England that Nigel Farage's, what's now called Reform Party, sort of the ghost of UKIP was his previous political incarnation. It's very typical of the type of area that he does well. That is A, poor, B, has low education levels, C is mostly or overwhelmingly white. However, obviously Keir Starmer is not doing terribly well as leader of the Labour Party and as Prime Minister. He won the election. God, was that only last year? It feels like a lifetime ago. And he won with a huge majority. So there's 650 seats in the House of Parliament. You need 325 or thereabouts to have a majority. He got, I think, 430. So he had this enormous majority. The Conservatives just had a wipeout. But what was dangerous about that was he got that enormous majority actually with remarkably few votes, because even then the Reform Party, Nigel Farage, was nipping at the heels and taking away a lot of votes from the Conservatives. So the votes against Labour were split, and in this first past the post system, which is sort of designed for a two-party electoral system, I guess like you have in the US, but with 5 viable parties, that can give very, very capricious and strange results. So that's what happened. So Keir Starmer was enormously flattering. You know, the figure, this huge majority, was really flattering and kind of disguised that he didn't really get a huge vote. The problem for him now is, well, the first issue was that who would take over from him? And in the UK, the Prime Minister must be a member of Parliament. There's no such thing as division of powers. Whoever is the leader of the party that has the majority is the Prime Minister, and that's that. And the one credible candidate in Parliament is a guy called Wes Streeting. And the problem with him is that really he's just a photocopy of Keir Starmer. There's no real reason to change from him. There is a much more credible former MP, a guy called Andy Burnham, but he's a former MP because he was elected as the mayor of Manchester, so he was no longer in Parliament, which means he is not eligible to be either the leader of the Labour Party or a prime minister.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Yes, so about a month ago, there was a by-election, and Andy Burnham wanted to be the Labour Party candidate in that, and Keir Starmer saw exactly what was coming down the line and came up with some reason about why it was important that the mayor of Manchester stay on as mayor and not become a member of Parliament and therefore not become a rival to him. And they thought that they didn't pay much attention to this. This was in a safe Labour seat. Labour got their asses kicked, and the Green Party, for the first time in its history, won a by-election, and that was a heck of a shock. Since then, an ally of Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, decided to fall on his sword and say that he would resign from Parliament in order to create another by-election. And at this point, Keir Starmer basically didn't have the electoral capital, the political capital, to be able to refuse him permission to be the candidate. So Andy Burnham is the Labour Party candidate. But is that this area in the local elections was the Reform Party, Nigel Farage's party, swept the board. And in some of the councils there, they won every single seat on the local council, every single seat, despite the fact that they have no idea how to run a council, but that's a whole different story. So Andy Burnham comes back, and in fact, Andy Burnham has very successfully fought back against Nigel Farage, and in the opinion polling, he is slated to win. But, and here is the but, he is winning with maybe 46, 47, depending on which poll you read, percent of the vote, because the Reform Party are very close. They are behind in all the polls, but they are, and I'm looking at the polls here, so the latest poll has Andy Burnham 12 points ahead of Reform. But other polls have him only 5 points or only 3 points ahead of Reform. So that's not a sure thing. It's not necessarily outside the margin of error. But the real kick here is, and you're going to get lost in the names here, as well as Reform UK, which is Nigel Farage's party. He won 5 seats in the House of Commons in the last British general election. Of those 5 MPs, 40%, that's to say 2 of them, have been kicked out of the party, one for beating his wife and another one for disagreeing with Nigel Farage. And the guy who was kicked out for disagreeing with Nigel Farage is a guy called Rupert Lowe, who has since then established an even more vigorously racist anti-immigrant party, which he is calling, instead of Reform UK, he's calling it Restore Britain. And they are running a candidate there. And you would think that that wouldn't have very much traction, and it wouldn't, but for the fact that this guy, Rupert Lowe, and his Restore Britain, not Reform UK, his Restore Britain party, has gotten traction with a certain trillionaire who is funding his campaign and massively amplifying his message on a certain website, which is perhaps now known for promoting, let's say, fake news on social media. And this party, Restore Britain, hasn't a chance in hell of winning, but in the polls they're getting 6, 7, 8%.
So they could be a spoiler?
depending on which one you read, on how it turns out. I think actually Andy Burnham, because he's quite popular, and it's notable on all of his literature, it all says vote for Andy Burnham. And you would need a magnifying glass. You'd probably need a microscope to see where on his leaflet it says that he's a member of the Labour Party, and that says a lot about about his campaign. But so, as I said, if Andy Burnham, well, put it this way: if the Reform Party candidate wins, and Keir Starmer loses what should be one of the safest Labour seats in the country, that will cause ructions within the Labour Party. To have lost 2 by-elections in what should be incredibly safe seats, and there's nothing that motivates politicians more than the loss of losing their job.
Yeah, really.
So if Keir Starmer and the Labour Party lose that by-election, then Keir Starmer is toast. But if they win the by-election, that means that Andy Burnham is now a member of Parliament and is eligible to be leader of the Labour Party and become Prime Minister. And I think it's almost impossible to decide which vote would see Keir Starmer kicked out of Downing Street faster.
My goodness, it's like a telenovela or a soap opera. The shows,
really is.
All these characters and who's up, who's down, and who's good and who's evil, and it is so amazing. William, we need to take a break, but when we come back, you probably heard at the top of the news, and there's been reporting in The Guardian about how a Russian ship fired on a sailboat. They call it a yacht. It looks like a sailboat to me. Yes. Wandered in the fog and got too close. But
I'm not sure about that, but we'll talk about it after the break.
Yeah, what caught my eye was that the article talks about heightened tensions between London and Moscow, and apparently there was a Russian ship that the UK Navy seized off the Isle of Wight. I want to talk to you about that situation. I'm talking to William Campbell. He's from Ireland and does the podcast Here's How, about all things social, political, and cultural in Ireland. We'll be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm speaking with William Campbell, who is based in Ireland and does the podcast Here's How, where he talks about all things going on in Ireland, social, political, cultural. We also ask him frequently to weigh in on anything going on pretty much in the United Kingdom. And, you heard at the top of the news that there was a sailboat that was fired on because it got too close to a Russian ship. And the interesting thing is in The Guardian, it said, well, that was an indication of increasing tensions between London and Russia. And apparently that is because the United Kingdom seized a Russian-linked oil tanker, the Smirtos, off the coast of the Isle of Wight. And this is the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, William, I believe this is the first time that British forces have led the seizure of a sanctioned vessel. This is part of the whole situation with Ukraine. Is this the beginning of a new layer in this conflict?
Yes, no doubt about it. And I don't believe for a moment, not for a moment, that that incident with the Russian warship and the yacht happened as described. That's nonsense.
Really?
Not for a moment. There is a line at the start of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book where a guy is lying down in front of a bulldozer that's threatening to bulldoze his house, and the guy in charge of the situation comes up to the homeowner and says, "Do you know how much damage it would do to my bulldozer if it rolled over you?" And the guy says, "No, how much?" And he goes, "Absolutely none." And that's exactly how much damage that a yacht could do to a warship. That yacht would have been there nothing larger than a matchstick would have remained if those two boats had collided. Nothing larger than a matchstick would have remained of the yacht. So
because that was they said they fired the warning shots because they were afraid there was going to be a collision.
Yeah, that's absolute nonsense. What happened earlier in the day was that what is called the Russian shadow fleet, so Russian oil and Russian oil tankers that are used to transport that are sanctioned. They are not allowed into the waters of any of the countries that are sanctioning that oil, which includes all EU countries. They are not allowed to carry that oil. They cannot get insurance for that. So one of the ways to evade that is the Russian authorities are hiring through shell companies and various layers of shell companies registered in tax havens and so forth. Companies that own these ships, these tankers that are transporting oil. They switch off their transponders, which is unheard of in normal commercial shipping, and they don't admit to anyone what they are doing, but it is blindingly obvious that they're taking oil when the Ukrainians aren't managing to set it on fire, which is fairly rare these days. They are taking oil and transporting it to clients, typically India and some third world countries are buying it at a knockdown price. The British Navy is not necessarily an organisation I'd have a lot of sympathy with it, but they were entirely within their rights, and indeed they were legally required to take that boat that was illegally going through their waters. The Russians are furious with this, and that the fact that this happened, and that is like a warship firing on a small little sailboat like that is utterly unheard of. I've never heard of that happening in many, many years. The fact that it happens later the same day tells you all you need to know about that. And that comes on a verdict in a trial a couple of years ago of 3 men who were alleged, 2 men were convicted of attempting to burn down Keir Starmer's house. The BBC is reporting today that those men were directly in the pay and directly taking orders from elements within basically from the Kremlin. And they were paid and given precise instructions of what to do and where to go in order to burn down Keir Starmer's private residence. There was a considerable fire. They had a degree of success in that. That is very little short of an act of war. And I think that type of behavior shows the degree, well, 2 things. Number one, the degree to which Russia, the Kremlin, Putin in particular, are frustrated with the outcome in Ukraine. And number 2, how they don't play by the rules. Mm-hmm. They have absolutely no intention of using the norms and international rules of behavior for any purpose at all other than as an excuse to try and get away with things. And I'm actually quite shocked at how timid the British reaction has been to this. And I genuinely don't know why. Typically, in Europe, although I'd have many criticisms of the British, they have been much more to the fore in understanding the threat that is coming from Putin's regime than several other, particularly Germany and France. France not so bad, I would say, but Germany and some other countries have just not internalized the level of threat that Putin is posing to Europe.
William, we're going to have to interrupt us there. We have, I have not been paying close attention to the time, and I've been too much involved in the discussion, so we've gone a little over, but I thank you so much for joining us, and obviously there's a lot to talk about. We will not wait so long before we do this again. Thank you so much, William.
Absolutely.
William Campbell.
Talk to you again, Joan. Bye-bye. Good afternoon.
Bye. From Ireland does the podcast Here's How. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Right now on WCPT 820.
Political science professor Joel Ostrow is an expert on Russia. He has been our go-to person to talk about what is going on in Ukraine. Joel, how are you doing today?
Good afternoon. Doing great. How are you, Joan?
I am reasonably well. Thank you very much. I saw a former military guy being interviewed at length on CNN this morning. You know, apparently Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked the United States not for Patriot batteries, but just they're willing to make their own. They're trying to make their own. They could just use a little bit of technical assistance on how to effectively make their own so that they can stop some of these attacks that are hitting civilian areas from Russia. And the military man talking on CNN said that if Ukraine, whether they're given Patriot missile batteries or whether they build them themselves, that could turn the tide, that the conflict is in such a place right now that if they could more effectively defend themselves from air attacks, that they could, the implication was that they could win this thing. Have you heard that? And what do you think of that?
Well, I think I said essentially the same thing the last time I was on air with you, Joan.
But we didn't know he was going to build his own and that he was asking for them. And
well, so there's 2 points. The first is had Kamala Harris won the election or Trump not, turned U.S. policy towards Russia, had we continued to supply Patriot interceptors, meaning the rockets that those batteries launched to shoot down Russian missiles, there's a very good chance that Ukraine's advances, territorial advances, would have been enough already to force Russia to the table. It certainly would be imminent. Ukraine started asking for the design information to build its own interceptors. I'm not aware that that they're looking to build the batteries. That the entire systems, and a whole system takes years to build. What they're running out of are the interceptors, the rockets that launch from those. Each one, I think, carries each battery is able to, each launcher, is able to launch 16 different rockets. And they have at least a dozen, maybe more like 18 of those around the country. They just have run out of the rockets that intercept Russian missiles. So that's what they want to build. That's what they need the technology for. It's mostly the guidance mechanisms that interface with the Patriot radar systems. At the same time, Ukraine is trying to build its own. My hunch is what they're trying to do is independently reverse engineer it, and they're going to find that very difficult to do. But they desperately need. So they have the anti-drone technology, right? They have these cheap drones that are shooting down the Russian Shaheeds. Those are working very well. What they lack the capability to do is to shoot down the Russian missiles, and that's why you hear of these attacks on Ukrainian cities. So if they're able to figure that out, either way, nothing's happening tomorrow. These things take a long time to build, minimum of 6 months, probably more like a year for building a cache of the Patriot interceptors. So Ukraine's in a desperate situation in regards to attacks by Russian missiles.
Is there, I mean, I don't know much about this technology except that it is pretty useful at bringing down missiles from the air. Is there, and I've read about how, like especially with Iran, so much of the material we've been using, is so expensive and it costs millions to take down a $60,000 drone, and how that takes a couple of years to build these things. Can't we figure out a way to do something like this more simply? I mean, I don't understand why it would take years to build one of these things. I mean, we've been building them. We should have an idea of how it's done. Seems to me that there would be some steps we could simplify.
What's even more startling is how few of the Patriot batteries, meaning the launchers, the sets of launchers. So each, boy, I knew this off the top of my head before. It's been a while since I've looked at it because it's kind of been out of discussion. But a Patriot battery consists of multiple launchers. I want to say 4, a radar system, and then the interceptors that go into each of the launchers that shoot down the missiles. They're quite complex. And I think it's the guidance and sort of communications electronics that are part of those interceptors that make it difficult. But the interceptors themselves take about a year, and an entire system takes a couple of years. That there's a lot that goes into them. Could they be done faster? I guess the United States hadn't seen the urgency in ramping it up, and that is proving to be quite alarming to Europe. This war against Iran that we decided to unleash for no apparent reason and no apparent gain has depleted Patriot missile stocks globally to really alarming levels, and also our Tomahawk missile supplies and other supplies. There are reports that that United States inventory of the high tech armaments are really alarmingly low right now.
Well, and one of the other
just mismanagement by Hegseth and Trump.
One of the other, I think, things to worry about with Trump announcing that, everything is fine in Iran, we've got an agreement, yada, yada. But then he said sort of like, well, now that I don't have to worry about Iran, I can focus more attention on Ukraine. And I thought, oh, God, that's not what we need. Did you read that? And do you think he's going to go back to his Putin is my friend? Can't he help me out here with a ceasefire or something? I don't know.
So we know that that since this Iran war started, the inferiority of the United States and European anti-drone technology has been exposed, meaning where Ukraine has now independently developed a capacity to shoot down even the Russian improved Shaheeds. The United States and its allies have been unable to shoot down the less technologically sophisticated Iranian-made Shaheed drones. We were using Patriot missiles to shoot down those very inexpensive drones. That's what Ukraine had to do at the beginning before it had developed its anti-drone technology. I'm wading into the weeds here a little bit, I know, but you might remember that Zelensky kind of, I saw it as a sarcastic kind of poke in the gut at Trump, saying, hey, we've got this technology, we can help you. But he's not offering it free of charge. And as I've said, really every time I've talked about this, Ukraine wants something in return. And given that they can't get Patriot missiles or other ballistic missile defense systems, because Europe now needs to keep anything that it has, given the shortage of Patriots, they then they will essentially offer to trade their drone technology for our ballistic missile defense technology. And when I say our, Zelensky is reaching out to the French and to the Germans and to the British, which all have systems analogous to our Patriot systems, to see, if he can get a deal like that. But no matter what, it's going to take Ukraine a while to independently produce those things. But that's what he's pining after. And he's got something to offer.
Sometimes very cynical listeners one of whom texted in today that Donald Trump, when he said he was going to turn his attention to Ukraine, that he wouldn't do anything, just like even though Iran says Lebanon is part of the deal, stop the attacks on Lebanon or there's no peace deal. The thinking is that Putin has compromising information about Donald Trump. I think it is more likely that Donald Trump will simply do whatever Putin wants because Putin waves dollar signs in front of him. Hey, you want a hotel? And I think Netanyahu does the same thing. Yet Netanyahu plays to his ego and makes him promises that he gets all excited about, and then he goes off and does stupid things. What do you think is more likely? Why does he have an inability to rein in Netanyahu or Vladimir Putin?
He doesn't want to rein in Putin. He wants to, for him and his family and his inner circle, to make hundreds of billions of dollars through business deals across Russia, whether that is real estate or minerals or petroleum and other sectors. That's all they care about. That's all this regime care about. That's all fascist regimes care about is power and self-aggrandizement and corrupt profiteering at the expense of the public. And Trump has consistently been, he lifted the sanctions on Russian export of oil and gas when gas prices jumped after he launched this war against Iran. He has quietly lifted sanctions on American tech companies who have been selling electronic components that Russia's been incorporating into their upgraded Shahed drones. And none of that is working for Russia. Ukraine has unleashed its quote-unquote long-range sanctions against Russia, meaning it has crippled over 40% of Russia's oil and gas export production. Just in the last 24 hours, they successfully struck one of Gazprom's, the main gas state-run gas company in Russia, quasi-state, in Moscow, a refinery, an oil refinery that is responsible for producing a third of Moscow's fuel demands. That has been entirely shut down. Not entirely destroyed, but it's going to be a long time before that's up and running again. They've been doing this around Russia at long range as they have developed long-range drones. Ukraine is, by all accounts, is poised to start deploying, meaning firing, its own domestically developed and produced cruise missiles, which will be able to travel over most of Russian territory to, again, attack those aspects of Russia's economy that are most threatening to Ukraine. That's its financial interest, which is the oil and gas export, which has been used to try to fund its war effort, and to go after its Russia's drone and missile production facilities, ammunition storage areas, and then, of course, to go after military units in the occupied territories near which are firing these weapons by the hundreds every single day at Ukrainian cities. Ukraine is proving wildly successful at all of that. Ukraine, since the beginning of the year, has experienced a net gain of nearly 300 kilometers of territory. This is the first time they've experienced extended gains in territory at the expense of the areas that Russia is occupying since late in the first year of the war. Crimea is almost entirely cut off now, meaning Russia has no way to get supplies, military or fuel to Crimea. Gas and oil are being rationed in Crimea drastically. Ukraine is really outperforming everywhere even at levels that are beyond what we talked about 1 or 2 weeks ago.
Joel, I want to talk to you more about that.
The only area where it's suffering is they can't stop Russia's missiles anymore.
I want you to expound on that, but we need to take a break.
Yep.
Joel Ostro and I, political science professor Joel Ostro and I, will be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And political science professor Joel Ostro is here. We have been talking about Ukraine. And Joel, you were talking about Russia when I so rudely interrupted you. If you're like me, you can't remember what you were saying, but you're younger than me, so you probably do remember. So if you do, pick up your thoughts.
Yeah, so Russia in 2014 seized Crimea. And then it planned for years, and then in 2022 unleashed this war to take over all of the Donbass, which consists of a couple of different regions. It wanted Donbass to create what has been called a land bridge, meaning to connect the main part of Russia to Crimea, so that they didn't have to go through Ukraine to supply it, right? So that has been its main objective in the war. In 2023, you will remember the United States delayed supplying tanks, medium-range missiles, and other various armaments, the ATACMS and Patriots. We were slow and overly cautious, the Biden administration was, to arm Ukraine with the high-tech weapons. So during that period, Russia built up incredible defenses in the areas it occupied and in Crimea to prevent a Ukrainian counterattack. Ukraine did launch a counteroffensive once it did get tanks and other weapons, but by then Russia had the defenses and were basically able to fight it off, and so there was a stalemate. But now Ukraine has produced these drones. The first thing they did was they took out Russia's air defenses, and then they started attacking military depots, naval bases, destroyers and ships that were launching cruise missiles from the Black Sea. And the result is that Russia has had to relocate its Black Sea fleet from Crimea back to mainland Russia. And Ukraine has turned the highways that create that so-called land bridge into a hellscape. Russia can no longer provide logistical supplies, fuels, ammunition, weaponry, food. They cannot supply Crimea anymore. Crimea is effectively cut off. And Crimea, oil, electricity, gas are rationed severely across Crimea. The people who are living there are not able even to fill their automobiles with gas. They can only get a couple gallons at a time. Ukraine is successfully making bridges unusable. And this is a first step towards trying to reclaim that territory of Crimea, which people had long assumed they wouldn't be able to do. But they have air superiority in that over those highways. Russia cannot move its forces. And on a daily basis, when they try, they're not only losing equipment and weapons, they're also losing soldiers at an alarming rate, to the point where there are now mutinies. Soldiers are refusing to take any vehicles onto those roads anymore.
Oh, you mean they don't want to be cannon fodder anymore?
Yeah. And
Imagine
you
that.
can expect when Ukraine does unveil these cruise missiles, they're going to hit key sites in Crimea, military bases and ammunition depots. There are reports, and I've only seen it in one place. It was a source that I trust, but on something like this, I like to see it in a few places, particularly the Institute for the Study of War, and they have not reported this yet. But the one report I did see said that Ukraine has been sending warnings to people in various parts of Crimea to evacuate.
Wow. Well, we've got if you see that corroborated, give me a heads up, because that's
for sure.
That's amazing. Joel, thank you so much for talking with me today and going over where things stand at this moment. And God, I hope things continue to go Ukraine's way. And I hope to God Donald Trump just stays out of it. That's just all I need. Just stay out of it. Thank
Slava
you, Joel.
Ukraini, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joel Ostro, political science professor from Benedictine University. That is going to do it for us today. Hey, I'm really excited about tomorrow. We're going to be talking to Barbara McQuaid. Yes, she's one of the sisters-in-law. She has been a very effective Trump critic from her role when she used to be a very, very high-powered attorney within the Justice Department. And also, we're going to talk to David Hochberg. So think about your questions for David Hochberg and text them to me. If they come to you, I'll make sure to ask him. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is up next. Her co-host, Joe Kilgallen, joins her, and they're going to be talking to the Associate Director of Coalitions for Women Employed, Star de los Santos, and others. And tomorrow on Richard Chu, he's going to be talking with John Parker, host of The Gailey Show, and Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys. She's also candidate for Wisconsin governor. Lots of stuff going on. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you listening and being a part of this show. Have a great evening. I will see you tomorrow. Good night.